I personally believe, is because of our countless generations being silent and helping to build incredible societies.
With this new age, with this new frame and model of business that is going to be had, the way that things are evolving, we as leaders have to evolve too. Welcome to Evolve Ventures, the one place where leaders like you can dependably go to shift your consciousness to unlimited potential. I am your host, Bianca Thomas.
And I am your host, Emilia Smith, and we are super excited to dive into this episode. But first, before we get into that, we really hope you enjoyed our last episode, which is a great episode for anyone who's interested in evolving their definition of love. Number 91 was how to evolve your definition of love. And that's where Bianca and I really took a lot of our awarenesses that we've gathered and put that into one high-level episode. And it was a really, really enjoyable one. So hopefully you can take a listen to that. But this one, 92, why women are primed to be better leaders, is a bold statement, yes, but we are here to make it. We are for that. And we'll get into some of the why. But first, before we dive into that, I want to share a little bit of my experience. And this is going to be a bite-sized episode, yes, but just as a woman, as a white Caucasian woman growing up, I have so many stories that I can point to, which would have me not really thinking that I maybe in comparison to a male counterpart right now in this 21st century, I'm not necessarily primed to be a better leader. I have a lot of evidence from my upbringing and from just the society as it's been formed that tells me, or that allows me to interpret these messages, that maybe I'm not good enough to be a leader, or that being a woman isn't synonymous with leadership. Now, some people in different cultures might have a very different experience, but I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of women I know that are out there that are stacked with experiences like mine, where maybe they grew up from childhood and they weren't the first ones to, even as small as this, right? To be the first one in line when it comes to the school, lining up to go to the cafeteria, right? Maybe she wasn't chosen. Or if you needed to lead a bunch of children on the soccer field, it wasn't necessarily her first. And I have a lot of these experiences. However, what I realize now is that a lot of the being okay with maybe getting chosen second, or maybe not being in the front of the pack, have built a tremendous leader that I now am. And Bianca, I know you are, because the perspective maybe from the back, when you are in, I remember being hiking in New Zealand, and I think I told this story in a different episode, but I was in the back and the leader would switch with a person in the front after so long. And you would only go as fast as the person in the front. And so to make sure that, you weren't going too fast and leaving people behind, the person who had the slowest pace would then go to the front of the pack. And I remember that as a really distinct leadership lesson, because of the fact that you would have never thought that that's a great approach to leadership, right? You would have thought just the fastest, strongest, whatever should be at the front of the pack, right? Should be leading everyone else, because a lot of society has said that that's the best way to go about leadership, right? Leadership as we know it. Now, thankfully, that's evolved. But when it comes to women being primed to be better leaders, we state that bold statement because of this fact that it wasn't necessarily called out there as much. It wasn't necessarily that our courage and our strength and our bravery is what truly is the strength of every pack. And it's awesome now because that message is changing. And when it comes to those experiences, I have countless number of experiences where I was the one that was the shoulder where people could cry on, right? I was the one where people could psychologically feel safe to come to when they needed guidance. Whereas the quote unquote leader of the pack, if you will, wasn't. People didn't want to go to them. They didn't want to talk to them. They didn't want to even be around them because they felt as though that person was unreachable to them. That person was way too good to ever talk to this person who's just about growing and developing their own path and their own leadership skills. And so it wasn't, really until recently where I really realized and self-identified as a leader. And Bianca, you and I have had so many conversations in this, but why women are primed to be better leaders, I personally believe, is because of our countless generations being silent and helping to build incredible societies. And not in the silence, but in the bravery to help build that and to help navigate the change in so many different ways that people will have never seen. And I know if you're a woman listening to this, I know that there's aspects of your life that some people will never see you in because you have been strategizing and preparing for these moments all along. So there was a research study that I was reading, and I'll put the link in the show notes here. That was a Harvard Business Review article, and it was a research done in 2020. And what it had done in this research study, it took over 30,000 people and did a 360-degree feedback review, which essentially means it's getting input from peers that you work with. So asking the peers, what are their perspectives when it comes to leadership specifically? And in this time of crisis, right? 2020 through 2022, right? This COVID-19 crisis has shown as such a pressure cooker for so many people and their leadership skills, right? When there's a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty, that is when people's true colors show. And what it showed in this study was that hands down, women were shown to be more effective leaders than their male counterparts rated in this survey in all competencies that they evaluated. And to give context, the top 3 competencies I thought were fascinating was number 1, taking initiative, right? Even when they might not know everything, they just go for it. Right. Number 2 is learning agility, being able to learn and adapt, even when they might not fully believe in themselves, or they might fully believe in the mission, or they might not fully think that this is the right way, but intuitively trusting those pulls, those feminine pulls. And then the third one, inspires and motivates others, which I think is fascinating. This part of the interpersonal skills that these women have been able to show and display, and women all over the world. And I know it's not just women, but in this study specifically, this is what has really separated from a gender perspective the feminine qualities and how beneficial those are to the world when it comes to leadership. And why we believe here that why women are primed to be better leaders is because those taking initiatives, learning agility, and inspiring and motivating others, those interpersonal skills, those didn't just come out of nowhere, right? Those were built over years and years of challenge, of strife, of suffering, of even multitasking in some areas that maybe weren't productive to their own life, right? But understanding some of the challenges of legitimately like the hardness of life. And, those interpersonal skills where women were communicating more powerfully and focused on collaboration and teamwork, even though we had no idea what the future held. That plus the ability to pivot, learn new skills, and have extraordinary humility, get rid of their ego, on top of caring about employee development, those were the primary things that really set women apart. And especially when it came to the integrity and honesty component. The ability to get vulnerable, that is not seen historically with men. Egos are too fragile. What if we were to feel as though we were on the same level of all of our quote unquote employees, right? But the primary thing here is that women were able to be more empathetic to the stress, the frustration, and the anxiety that employees and their counterparts had. And I think that that's one of the biggest things when it comes to women leadership and why they're primed to be better leaders. The only competency, which I know is critical for Bianca, you and I to help empower women, especially in minorities, is in this area. They were very strong in this arena of the competencies that I just spoke about, except for one, in comparison to their male counterparts, which is the technical and professional experience or expertise, right? So technicalities, the excels of the world.
Yeah.
So let's put these technologies and softwares together. That's where they didn't score necessarily as high.
You know what that probably could be due to? I don't remember the name of the study. I don't remember when or where it came out, but there was a study that showed that men are more likely to apply for a position if they have one out of the 5 qualities needed for that position. Women could have 4 or 3 out of 5 and still believe that they're not qualified. And that's due to upbringing, due to societal expectations of women, or whatever the case may be. But women are more likely to believe that they're not capable of doing something, or they're not competent enough unless they can do it to near perfection. And I think that comes down to this idea that women are supposed to be these Wonder Women where they do it all. They can run a business and run a family and have the perfect marriage and still look like a goddess every single day. And I think what we're starting to learn is that's really not true. My mom was that. My mom was Wonder Woman, and it nearly burned her to the ground. That need to be perfect, that need to do everything right. So I was having a conversation with someone at work yesterday, and she saw me editing a spreadsheet. And it's funny because that technology would have been the one area where I said, I can't do this. I can't do tech. I don't know computers. I don't like this. I would cave in. I would shell up whenever we would talk about these topics. So yesterday I'm at work and I didn't have anything to do. So I spent an hour and a half trying to figure out a code to transfer one spreadsheet to another. And I still haven't figured it out, but we're gonna keep going.
I got you, bro.
And I'm doing this, and this girl who just recently started looked over at my computer and is like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing an Excel spreadsheet for my business. I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z." And she looked really confused. She's like, "Oh, you have a business?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a business leader. I'm a business owner." And even saying that, it was so weird. And Emilia and I talked about that yesterday, that it's still kind of challenging for me to even associate the fact that I am a business owner. I've been a business owner for 2 years. But we were talking and she said and she's only a couple years older than us. She's like in her early 30s. She said, "I can't learn all of this new technology stuff. It's just too complicated. I can't do it." And I remember thinking, that's really sad. She's only a couple years older than us. We're in the same generation. And yet her limiting beliefs about technology, about this new age of information and all of these systems that are emerging, she just innately felt not good enough. And I think, tying to your point, so many women just innately feel like they're not good enough, that they don't have the right qualities for leadership because of the old 20th century, your father and grandfather and great grandfather, now at this point, that old model of leadership where it's hierarchical, top down. There's a CEO and everyone needs to try to appease the CEO and the stakeholders and whatever. But what we're really starting to understand is with this new modern day, it's not, like Emilia said, those very hard, rigid qualities that make effective leadership. It is the more feminine traits. It's the ability to collaborate. It's raw, vulnerable communication. It's emotional intelligence. It's the ability to effectively rumble and say, you know what, I'm really struggling with something and I need to talk about it. Or there's this thing going on and you know what, we need to have a team conversation about it and I'm scared to talk about it. All of these more feminine traits that have been so looked down on for so many years, these are actually the traits and the qualities and the characteristics that now are going to allow businesses to thrive. Actually, you have to have these in order to be an effective leader, in order to run a team. I mean, Emilia and I, we just onboarded 5 new people onto our team. We are now a 7-person team. If we only used that old version of leadership, no one would want to work for us. Nobody would feel safe enough to come every single day and do the challenging work that we do. Or if they did have a struggle or if they did have something going on, be able to say, I'm really struggling right now. There's something going on and I need to talk about it. Or, Emilia and Bianca, this thing is going on and, I don't really like how you guys approached this. Can we talk about it? If our people don't feel safe enough to do that, if our team, what kind of leaders does that make us? What kind of team is that going to allow us to have? I mean, Emilia and I, we both, and I'm sure anyone listening to this, you've been in a job where you couldn't talk to leadership. You couldn't talk to your manager or your supervisor, or there was an environment where vulnerability wasn't allowed. Not that anyone has explicitly said, don't be vulnerable, but those are the messages you're hearing. Did you want to go to work every day? Because I didn't. I didn't want to be around my managers. I was scared. I was scared to make a mistake. I was scared to have a conversation. And so in wrapping up, we're not saying women are inevitably better leaders, right? That's not the message that we are trying to take away from this. But I think what we are trying to say, and my takeaway, is that with this new age, with this new frame and model of business that is going to be had, the way that things are evolving, we as leaders have to evolve too. And we need to evolve to this new understanding that these more feminine traits are absolutely critical. Emotional intelligence, vulnerability, effective communication, collaboration, the power of courage, all of these different traits that were dismissed before and thought of as weak are the traits and the qualities that are going to allow for you to have a successful business.
For sure. One of the first things that we shared with our team is we could have a box and put you in it, because that's what a lot of businesses will do. Now, that was not our approach for a very important reason, because no one likes to thrive. No one can thrive in a box, period. And you and I both know that. And so what we have made sure of that is so important to us is understanding the strengths and areas of growth for our individuals and making sure that we're pairing them, finding alignment and making alignment with what they care about and what the business needs are, right? And that's where truly quality leadership lies, is understanding that you have two ends of the equation. It's not just one, right? You have people and you have business needs. You cannot have business needs without people, and you cannot have people without business needs. It just doesn't work that way. And so with that being said, that doesn't undermine the necessity for structure, for systems, for technical competencies. That is not what we're saying here. But join us in following conversations to continue this discussion. One of my biggest takeaways from this episode, and then we'll go into episode suggestions here. If you really like this episode, or if it hit on a rung that maybe you're really interested in, is that, to Bianca's point, leadership needs to evolve. Leadership needs to evolve and evolve fast. But be steady in that steadfastness, right? Like, be steady in that and check in with the internal dialogues that are being had when it comes to leadership. If you don't know where your internal compass lies, how the heck are you going to lead? What are your values? And I know a lot of companies want to say that, but how is that being disseminated down? What are your actions actually showing? How do your employees actually feel? Right. And then Bianca and I, we talked about before this episode, we both had really agreed that the biggest takeaway from this episode and from this message that we have here is that there is a shift required. And with the great resignation that's happening right now, meaning a lot of people are leaving their jobs because they're not feeling appreciated, valued, seen, etc. They're leaving, right? They don't feel appreciated. I would too. I get it. Leadership, there is a shift that is a call to action for every single one of you. If you do not have some of these components within your leadership or in your management, definitely check that out. Some of my episode suggestions for this episode: number 47, what you need for effective communication. There is no leadership without communication, right? 13, why balance masculinity and femininity. And number 2, going very back from the second episode that we had out there, why collaboration is key. Bianca, what are your episode suggestions?
Number 34, why your environment predicts your success. Number 54, what is modern day leadership? And number 55, the 3 musts for modern communication or collaboration. I'm sorry.
Awesome. Thank you.
Beautiful.
All right. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Please share it with someone that you really care about, or someone that you know maybe is struggling in this realm. It certainly warms your heart when you have a friend send a really valuable episode, or at least it starts to stir the pot for some of the things that they're interested in. And please click in the show notes for that article that we had referenced, and reach out to Bianca or myself anytime.
If you're really feeling brave, send this to your manager or your supervisor, just like slide it into their email box. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, if you're really feeling bold, go for it.
Honestly, that's a great idea. Like, I was listening to this podcast recently, and they said something in here that got me thinking of, what are we doing as a team to really embody this? And this is where I think this is happening in our team. And I really want to celebrate that. We could say that in another episode, but anyways, that's love it.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for being a part of our community. Every Friday at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. We have changed this time so many times, and we're sorry for the inconsistency. It has been an uphill battle, and we are failing forward, but every Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we host a live event on Instagram. Follow my Instagram, follow Emilia for all of that. And at the end of every month, we host Out of the Mud, which is a free live virtual event. So be on the lookout for all of those. Thank you so much for, like I said, being a part of this community, and we will talk to you all soon.
So much love, everyone. Bye.